Bring in William Lawrence now, former US diplomat. He joins me live from Washington, D.C. Great to have you on, William. Now, listening to the comments that come from US leaders, and I just made this, it is a criticism. I do believe that Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, they live in this world of hyperbole where everything is at the extremes. Everything is total annihilation, total destruction. It's very difficult to understand what is actually going on when people speak like that. So Trump says that the US has totally destroyed Iran's military capabilities. And at the same time, you've got Israel saying that they are now going to be targeting Iran's military capabilities, which apparently have already been destroyed, according to Trump. So where do you think reality lies now?
Far away from what they're saying. Iran has a million-man army that's still there. Iran has significant naval assets and significant missile assets. They're still there. I think this is aspirational talk, if not just hyperbolic talk. And it's because Israel wants a long war to completely dismantle the military and the Navy and all of the force of Iran to the extent possible, similarly to what they did in Syria after Sharak came to power in December of 2024, and with all of their neighbors. That's what they want to do, to dismantle the militaries. The U.S. is aligned with Israel in certain aspects of this, not in others. But as the Iranians know, Trump and Hegseth want quick wins. It's why Trump was talking about 4 to 5 days early on and then talking about 4 to 5 weeks now. But they want quick wins. And that's why the Iranians are talking about their hope that the regime can hang on and they can create a quagmire. I think one of the wild cards now is those 15,000 Iranian Kurdish troops mobilizing at the Iranian border in northern Iraq, who said if they get enough American and Israeli air support, they are going to invade Iran. And you could imagine other insurgencies in the Baluch area and elsewhere. And that would be a long war, but a long insurgency, another proxy war in the region that could go on for some time. That's not what Trump wants. The Israelis are fine with that.
This seems to me like it's a short-term target, trying to remove all of the military strength of Iran. But if we look a bit further forward, is this not going to encourage a mindset whereby if a country's had all of its ability to defend itself removed, that it will plan to develop the ability going forward now? And won't it also foster an awful lot of hatred towards the United States and Israel?
If I understood your question correctly, I mean, what the U.S. is doing here, both for Iran and for the whole world, is create new precedents whereby all or nothing offenses will be met with all or nothing defenses. And that's why, for example, the Iranians now are withholding some of their missiles for the long war. That's why the Iranians now are creating these sort of internal sort of strike capabilities where they send the drones and launchers and then go back and hide in caves or underground and try not to be detected by the satellites and the American weapons. And we're also creating narratives that support the development of nuclear weapons because these become existential crises. In a world where an eye for an eye, and don't forget, a lot of this is a revenge war against Iran for 79 by the United States and for all of these proxy wars for Israel, that, it's not just, a logical military campaign, but there's an emotionality to this and a messianic quality. As Hegseth's people are saying to the U.S. troops, you will bring, on a regular basis, this is widely reported, that you are bringing Armageddon sooner and the return of Jesus Christ earlier if you kill Iranians. So, all of this mush and all of this mix creates a situation where, the old logics of war are going away and we have a new kind of, all or nothing mentality that bodes very badly for international law, international norms, and international peace going forward.
Yeah, speaking of international norms, and let's speak actually about international law, which nobody seems to be paying any attention to anymore. But as I understand, there was no evidence that Iran had developed a nuclear weapon or even close to doing that. So who is it for the US and Israel to be able to play the role of world police and decide which countries can and cannot have weapons, ballistic missiles? Many countries around the world have them. Who are the US and Israel to say, we're not going to let you have them, Iran?
It's not. They have no right under international law. They have no right under international norms. I mean, the Israelis and the Americans, in particular, in recent years and decades, have created their own precedent, their own right to themselves to strike whoever they want preemptively. And in this case, they made up pretexts and then sort of backpedaled and said, this preemptive strike was to go against attacks that were presumably coming whenever. It's a lot of mush, and it's a lot of pretextual reasons for strikes that, when you think about international law, international norms, and just how humans deal with other humans, imagine if it was done to you. Imagine if Americans had their president, their secretary of state, their head of intelligence killed in one strike. Imagine if Americans, some foreign powers, trying to dismantle their navy and their army, in a month or something. I mean, the reaction in the United States would be ferocious and decentralized, like we're beginning to see in Iran, as an all or nothing defense began. What's a little bit different in Iran is, and this was deliberate by the Trump and Netanyahu administrations, is that you had those large protests with as many as 30,000 people killed in Iran. And so, if you look at what's going on the ground in Iran, while there is rally around the flag effect in some places, in other places, people are just happy to see the Basir, areas getting struck and the people who are responsible for killing lots of Iranians getting killed. So there's that element of it too, but none of that bodes well for a quick change of affairs. And not only are we having the potentiality of long years of problems in Iran, but new precedents in international relations that are just terrible, and also disruptive and dismantling of the post-World War II consensus, which, although it often failed, it also often succeeded to stop wars, prevent wars, and create mechanisms to deconflict situations. Now, the precedent is just, if I don't like what you're doing, I can kill your leadership.
I like the way that you just turned the tables there and said, imagine if it was the other way around. Imagine when there was unrest on the streets of Portland, if Iran had said, well, it's okay, we're going to come in and save you. But I want to speak a little bit about what Abbas Araghchi had to say about, he started talking about the possibility of a ground invasion. Why is he talking about that? Is that a possibility?
I was listening carefully to his interviews and also how you reported it. And my first thought was, his audience is not just the international audience, but the domestic audience, because there is a problem here of a risk of defections in the Iranian military. A lot of people lost family members in the recent protests. There's all kinds of risks if Iranians aren't rallying around the flag. So part of it's just that, bellicose defensive talk that anyone in his position needs to do in these types of circumstances. And there isn't a U.S. ground invasion planned. There are 40,000 U.S. troops in the area, but I don't know how small it is. Probably less than 10,000 are ground troops. They're special forces. But no, the Americans aren't invading Iran anytime soon like they did in Iraq. You'd see 200,000 people converging on the area if that was the case to fight those million Iranians under arms. But what is going on here is the Iranian Kurds in northern Iraq who want to go in with 15,000 to 20,000. There are special forces probably already on the ground in Iran helping with targeting. There are other special force operations which presumably will be going in. And so what Araghchi wants to say is, join us in defending the country, and we're able to withstand anything. But the reality is, the regime is weak, the society is fragmented, and what the what the Israelis and Americans think is if they just hit hard enough, the whole thing can collapse. In that last calculation, I think they're deeply wrong, because Iranians, the last thing they want, as your reporter was referring to earlier, is for an American president who's killing thousands of their people, the 180 schoolgirls, all of that. The last thing they want is an American president to come in and tell them who's going to be their head of state. So there's no easy wins here. There's no quick solutions. It's messy.
As a diplomat yourself, William, if we look at the way that President Trump has operated, his administration was in negotiations with Iran. It seemed like there was some kind of progress being made, and then he just walked away from the table and started to assassinate their top officials. If I was a world leader sitting down to negotiate with President Trump, I'd be looking around for the sniper rifles. Has he killed off any kind of trust that anyone negotiating with him will have in the future?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, the reason why the Iranians have no trust in the Americans is they, violated the terms of the JCPOA, and then they've got a country, Israel, that bombs negotiators in Qatar, and then the Americans have now bombed Iran twice in the middle of negotiations between round 5 and 6 of the June negotiations and round 2 and 3 of the Geneva negotiations. And so, yeah, there's basically no trust left. But on the other hand, all wars end usually with some kind of negotiations. So we will be going back to negotiations at some point. Who will be negotiating on the Iranian side? We don't know yet. How much it'll be a Venezuela type situation where, regime, what remains of the regime is willing to make a deal and sort of is kowtowed into conceding a certain number of positions. I don't see, funnily, a big difference between, what the Danes had to do about Greenland, which is mollify Trump and then hope for a better day, than what the Venezuelans had to do with Trump, which was sort of give him some oil and give him some concessions, but really concede nothing long term. And eventually, what's left of the Iranian regime and is going to have to make a deal with the Americans and the Israelis when they're ready to make a deal. It's anybody's guess what's going to happen. But if I was going to bet on anything here, I'd bet on some elements of this Iranian regime surviving, because they've proven over the decades they really know how to survive.
William, great to speak to you. Thanks so much for your time. My guest is William Lawrence, former US diplomat.